Hello and welcome to the Purpose of Business with Mr. Bhaskar Pramanik. In the previous episode, we discussed the importance of purpose and how businesses that don't define theirs well enough or decide to simply play by revenue metrics may not be able to grow as effectively. Today, we're taking that conversation forward to what is the next logical step once purpose has been defined. But before that, a quick introduction. Mr. Bhaskar Pramanik has held global leadership positions in several technology MNCs in Singapore, India, and the US. He was on the executive committee of NASSCOM, the national committee of CII, and AmCham. Mr. Pramanik was chairman of Microsoft India, and before that, he was the MD of Oracle Corporation and Sun Microsystems in India. Currently, he is an independent board member and advisor to several companies. Thank you, Mr. Pramanik.
No, thank you. And it's a pleasure being back again. You know, the last time we met, we talked about the importance of purpose for a business. And we talked about the fact that it actually defines the company's core reason for being and its resulting positive impact on the world. We also said that purpose must connect with your company's superpower, its unique ability to create value. And once you've defined that well enough and you've integrated it along with the rest of the company, then you will get results which are truly remarkable. So I'm glad to be here again, and let's continue the conversation.
So, Mr. Pramanik, we define a purpose. How now to build a plan to drive that purpose in a manner that is evident through everything a company does? How best to embed it across all elements of the organization's DNA?
Absolutely, Arpit. In fact, companies with a genuinely lived purpose, they radiate authenticity, they do well by doing good. Customers, suppliers, partners, and investors recognize their value and their true value proposition. So it's really very critical and important to make the purpose lived, L-I-V-E-D. And I think that that's what we're really talking about. So how do you make purpose lived in an organization or live in an organization? How do you make the purpose part of you call the DNA, but I'm actually going to call it the operating system of a company. And that's really what is very critical. So there's actually 5 elements into which purpose has to be integrated. These are the 5 basic functions of any company, and purpose has to be integrated into those 5 elements. Number 1 is that you have to embed it into the portfolio strategy, the portfolio of products and technologies and services which you're offering, which is through which you provide value to your customers. And here you have to decide where to play and how to play. And to just give you an example, if you take Microsoft, when Microsoft created its new purpose to empower every organization and every individual on the planet to achieve more, the stress was on every organization and every individual. And to make that happen, Satya Nadella, the CEO, he passed a diktat that any new product, technology, or services which Microsoft will come out with in future must be usable by every individual, including people with disabilities, whether it was hearing impaired, whether it was visually impaired. And he says that the true power of computing, the true power of enhancing everybody's efficiency and productivity means every individual. So this was an example of where the higher purpose really went into the product strategy. The second element in which purpose must be embedded is in the people and culture. And I think all of us realize that, because if you think of the talent which we have in an organization, if the talent which we want to retain, the talent which we want to develop, you have to put purpose as at the center of all of that. People like to join companies with purpose they can identify with. Purpose enables them to take decisions when nobody's watching. It gives them that additional ability to do things without any supervision. It's, in a sense, part of the so-called collaborative engagement. Purpose also is reflected in the values of the company, and then the individual behaviors, which then has an impact on culture. So purpose is the core of that. I've seen a lot of companies which try to just focus on the values, but they don't realize that the values have to be aligned with the purpose, because otherwise there's a mismatch, and therefore the behaviors will not be appropriate. So it's very, very critical that you have to start thinking about how your purpose matches your people and your culture. So a lot of startups whom I've been sort of associated with in their early stages, one of the questions I ask after they've defined their mission, they've defined their purpose, where they're going to add values, who are their customers, I ask them, what kind of people are you going to recruit? And all of them say, we want to recruit people who are hardworking, who are technically superior, who got a lot of initiative. And I said, how does that relate to your purpose of the kind of, what you're trying to drive? And they don't have an answer for that. And I said that, everybody in the world is hardworking. How will you differentiate the ones who will truly match your organization values, your organization's purpose? So think about that. I said, you don't have to come out with it on the second day of your existence, but you need to, as you go forward, make sure that the kind of people and the talent which you hire are aligned with your purpose, because then you will truly get the multiplier effect. So that's number two. The third element, which where a purpose has to be embedded, is in your processes and systems. The operational processes you adopt to meet your targets, there's many of them, whether it is the where you search for customers, where it's the manufacturing processes, your vendor processes. If you look at a company, it's a combination of many multiple different processes, and each one of the processes adds different value to the overall value which you provide. And if you build purpose into those processes, you will start finding that you're taking decision and you're allocating resources and capital to the processes which really add additional value to your purpose. For example, TCNS, the clothing company, where I'm on the board of, they decided that as part of their supply chain, they will move a lot of their contract manufacturing to rural areas close to their hubs, so that they can create those communities which would become economically better, which would prosper by giving them work and helping them to set up this as a business, rather than going to the traditional mass-produced vendors. So this actually helped them to reduce their carbon footprint. It helped them to get more flexibility in their supply chain. It also helped them to get more creative in terms of the kind of products and which they were actually using. And they did this in a number of villages around Haryana and Uttar Pradesh. And this has really added to their value as a company, and it is added to their purpose as an organization. So this is another example where you can actually look at your existing processes and system and figure out, is purpose built into these processes? And if not, supply chains is a very, very good example. World over, many multinationals have been building products or making products out of China, but questions are being asked, or they've been making consumer products out of Bangladesh or Philippines. And now their consumers are asking, are you making sure that these vendors are looking after their workers? Do they provide them the necessary medical treatment, housing, and the welfare? Otherwise, we don't want to buy products from you. So they are all re-looking at their supply chains. And this is another example of how it's important to have the purpose built into your processes. The fourth area, which is important, is how do you measure your performance? And when we talk about performance, we are not talking about performance from an individual perspective, but also from a company perspective. So if individuals realize that if they start building purpose into their behaviors, into their action, and you reward them and compensate them accordingly, you will find that it will actually have a multiplier effect, and it will make the purpose much more lived in. And it's the same thing with companies. Companies need to understand that they need to allocate capital and resources to those individuals or to those parts of the organization which is fulfilling the higher purpose. And therefore, it has to be in the metrics of performance, even from a company perspective. The last area is, as a company, if you have a purpose which you have clearly defined and you're passionate about, then you need to be able to take it to the external world. And therefore, how you position yourself and what kind of engagements you have is going to become equally and more critical and more important. So today, CEOs of large companies actually do take a stand on different issues, whether it is on ESG, whether it is on climate control, whether it is on the Me Too movement. You've noticed that a lot of CEOs have now started taking positions on some of these. And this is really very critical, because if you are to be recognized for who you are, what your purpose is, then you actually have to walk the talk and you have to actually take those kinds of. So a lot of organizations are coming out of, a lot of enterprises are coming out of organizations which don't reflect their values and are joining or creating new organizations which truly reflect their values. So therefore, it's very important that when you think about your positioning and you think about your engagements and alliances, then even those reflect your purpose. So those are really the 5 elements which I would suggest is what I call the operating system of a company. These are the 5 elements of the operating system of a company where purpose must be embedded.
Mr. Pramanik, you spoke earlier about taking a hard look at one's products and services and seeing, checking if they are aligned or misaligned with the stated purpose. I had a question. How would a legacy company that deals in oil or petrochemicals perhaps revisit their portfolio? I mean, it's what they do, probably all they do, right? And it's not like we don't need these products anymore. So what's the guidance here for them?
So there's many examples of companies, in different fields. So I'll come back to energy because I've got a good example of a company, BP, which is actually doing that and has stated that very clearly. But before that, think about CVS, the pharmaceutical company. It took a decision that tobacco was bad for health, so they stopped selling cigarettes in their stores. Many others didn't, but CVS did. If you think about ITC, it took a conscious decision that here was tobacco, which was their biggest and the most largest and the most lucrative business. And they took a conscious decision many decades ago that they need to diversify the business and go into other areas. In fact, if you think about ITC, they actually believe in what they call responsible competitiveness. That means, yes, we will be a competitor, but we will be very responsible. So when they went to agri, when they went to foods, when they went to fast-moving consumer goods, it's always with that bias in mind. But coming back to your question about energy, think about BP. BP, 100% of its business was on fossil fuels. It was, it was an energy company which was primarily based upon petroleum products. It had petrochemicals, factories, refineries, etc., the whole work. It took a conscious decision that it will actually move out of fossil energy and move into more of renewable energy. And they're exploring things like green hydrogen. They will shrink their legacy product line by close to, I think they were mentioning about 40% by 2030. And they will scale up their low carbon business around bioenergy, hydrogen, and including electronic voltage charging, EV, electronic vehicle charging, to become a net zero carbon emitter by 2050. Now, you can say that this is a huge challenge for a company which was a 100% fossil fuel company, but they've taken a conscious decision because they really believe that their purpose is to provide a reimagining energy. Their purpose is reimagining energy for people and planet. And that's their new purpose. And that's why they've actually moved consciously towards that.
Mr. Pramanik, we're running out of time today, so we'll have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Clearly, purpose is no longer simply a nice talking point for entrepreneurs. It is the cost of entry for organizations to stay relevant. Sure, a company won't be able to become a purpose-driven company overnight, but if you don't start now and determine how every vertical and part of your business supports something larger than your company, you'll find your business not only behind the times, but perhaps behind the margin as well. Thank you, Mr. Pramanik, for these most valuable insights.
Thank you, Arpit. Pleasure being with you again.
Thank you, dear viewer, for watching. We'll catch up again next week. In the meantime, do like, share, and subscribe to My Take's YouTube channel and follow us on our social media handles. Thank you.